All right, we're on air. Today is Thursday, May 9th, and this is a meeting to check in on active development tasks for Backdrop Core. But before we get into talking about the product itself, I did want to let you know that if you're curious about what's going on with backdropcms.org, we covered a couple of issues we're working on there in the design and user experience meeting today. So you're welcome to watch that video to see how things are coming along there. I left the translation site section on here because I didn't know if you wanted to add anything, Olaf, but no. Okay.
No.
But I did want to say thank you, since you're here in person, for doing all the great work of figuring out what was up with translations and getting changes into the last version of, or into the next version of Backdrop Core that'll make translating sites much easier. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah.
And then for Backdrop CMS, the project itself, Nate's going to do a quick update on status of items that hopefully will get done before the release.
Yeah, so, okay, first of all, there's some issues that are still in the 1.12.7 release, which is 1.12 is the current minor version of Backdrop, and so 1.12.7 will be the final version, probably released on May 15th, along with 1.13. And we've got a couple of issues that we're trying to work through that will be in both that version and the 1.13 release. This first one, supporting multiple equivalent security releases, issued 3524. Seems pretty unlikely that we'll get that completed in the next week since there's no code behind it. But the idea being that we need to make it so that the previous minor version, when we release a bug fix version or security release for the current version plus the one prior to it, the one prior to it should not complain to you on the update status page saying that your site is insecure when you're on the latest version that includes a security fix equivalent to the latest version. So that issue, actually, I think we might still keep carrying it along in the 1.12 version anyway, possibly, because 1.12 will become the previous version and will need to be maintained for security updates until 1.14 is released. So if we do manage to make that functionality work, it would be nice if we could actually have that be in place for the 1.12 release during the entire time while it continues to be supported until 1.14 comes out. So maybe that won't make it for 1.12.7, but I don't know, maybe we'll still be able to make it in 1.12.8 or something like that, even after we officially stop, developing new features for 1.12, just because 1.12 will still be under security coverage, and we want that security coverage to be reflected accurately when you're using it. So I don't know, maybe we'll see about the impact. It's possible that 1.12 might get that one new feature or bug fix even after we're in security only updates, because it pertains so heavily to the security period of that release. Let's see, one last issue that we've got for 1.12.7. Well, I should say one last issue that we keep calling out on these meetings is that we have one more RTL issue with CK editor icons. They're still showing up broken in RTL languages. And so issue 3504 currently needs review, but I think it's been in that state for a couple of weeks now. I think we just need some eyeballs on it from someone to test it out and see if they think it's ready for committing. 1.13 is the next minor version of Backdrop. It'll be coming out really soon, less than a week, on Wednesday next week, May 15th, 2019. We had feature freeze a little over a week ago, and we got in a lot of things that are exciting, but I'm not going to recap those since I imagine that was already covered last week when I wasn't here. But we are working through some last items still in the next week, and if we get them completed, then that'll be great. Let's see. In the past week, we took field formatter settings. I actually before code freeze, we merged field formatter settings module into core. This past week, we made it so that if you have the contrib version of that module installed, it's gracefully disabled for you and switched over to the core implementation instead in issue 3742. So that's been merged. We have a follow-up in issue 3760. Right now, we have several places where a contrib module has been merged into core, but then during the update hook, we disable the old contrib module, replace it with the one in core, and then we provide a message up at the top of the update status page or update.php page saying, this module has been merged into core, you may remove it from your file system. And that means that we currently have the exact same code in a couple of different places where we've merged contrib modules into core. And so 3760 is an issue in which Khronos has consolidated that code where we have exactly the same code in multiple places and made it into a generic function. So that could be useful for ensuring consistency when we merge modules into core, as well as simplicity, making it so that when this problem occurs, we have a standard way of handling it. Let's see. We're trying to move the default views that ship with views module to their respective modules in issue 361. This one is currently held up. It's not really held up. It needs re-rolling because right now we're moving some views around, but not quite all of them. It looks like we moved the recent comments view into comment module, and we moved the taxonomy term listing pages into taxonomy module. But the promoted view, which is basically the home page, which is /node, is not moved into node module. And so the request on that one is that we move that third view out of views module and into node module so that all three modules own their respective views. Let's see. We also have a separate issue for converting the comment administration listing to a view, issue 549. It's currently blocked on another issue in which the comment administration currently has links to approve or deny a comment, but that requires we have these links that are have a token value appended to the URL that actually authenticates whether or not that link is valid or not. And so those token-based access checks are currently written into comment module on their listing page, but Views doesn't have the capability of displaying those tokens. And so we have another issue, 3306, in which we add support for tokens to Views links. Unfortunately, that needs some work still. And so it's likely that this issue of getting comments converted, the comment administration listing converted to a view is probably going to get stuck and not be in 113 because of being held up on this other dependent issue. But 3306 is where we need to start first. And then once 3306 is in place, then 549 can be completed. And lastly, let's see, we also have making it so that we can expose the file name filter for the media library dialog is issue 3293. There's no pull request behind this code yet. It's just a suggestion. So I'm kind of thinking that this is unlikely to be in 113 as well. So, but if we want to take a stab at it, we could potentially still make that happen. And that's all I've got for the 113 issue list. Like our number of items that we have still pending for 113 is really small because, at this point, we don't really want to make an extensive amount of changes. So yeah, that's it. Next up on the agenda, we're going to try to build out some planning for 114, the next minor version. We have a whole bunch of milestone candidates that are tagged in GitHub with the tag literally milestone candidate dash minor. And so we have a number of issues that we want to discuss as being possible candidates for 114. Jen, do you want to jump in here as well? We don't really have an official decision-making process for prioritizing things in the next release. Usually it's a combination of where there's enthusiasm combined with what we think is important, like as a community, and see if we can actually drum up some enthusiasm. But historically what's happened is that even things that we as a community might decide are important hasn't necessarily received a lot of enthusiasm. And so we can try to drum up enthusiasm and make it so that we can prioritize certain things, but that doesn't mean it always succeeds. So what we're going to do now, or at least, is try to figure out, what items we would like to drive enthusiasm towards, but possibly also, what things could be realistic as far as, there's already enthusiasm behind these things and we would just like to see them to completion.
Yeah, so I did an initial pass over the milestone candidate label, and I found a whole bunch of issues relating to security that I thought might make a nice release that was focused on security. And those included package signing, trusted host patterns, putting something like honeypot in core, putting something like ban or auto ban, either back in core or in core fresh, adding an email obfuscator, setting up a better way to handle two-factor authentication, including the SMTP module, which would require integration with the external service, and backup and migrate, which is our #1 most used module for Backdrop. So those are just ideas based on, I was like, oh wow, there's a whole bunch of stuff in here that's security related that we could kind of put a bunch of effort behind, and we could make Backdrop significantly more secure in one release, which would be really good. And it would kind of coincide with our announcing of our new security policy, the blog post that's going up, all of that stuff that has been happening recently. But Nate also mentioned last week in this meeting that there are a bunch of really good issues that had previously been scheduled for milestones and been bumped that maybe we should revisit. One of those included getting references in core. There were layout relationships, which were really close for a long time but never managed to get in. Fieldable files, which is only stuck in the usability department, but functionally it works. And then there's a bunch of other stuff that also has been bumped because it hasn't been getting activated. Like this past release, we bumped Save Draft in core. So there's stuff like that where it's like, oh, we thought these were good ideas, but they never really caught on. Obviously it wasn't important enough for anybody to feel that they personally had to work on it. Is it worth trying to bring those back in and say, okay, let's look at this again? Maybe we had one person on something, but we didn't get enough people to get it done, but we really liked the idea. Or we could, just take kind of a poll of whoever's in this meeting, whoever joins in Gitter, whoever has conversations otherwise about what they think priorities should be. We started a forum topic last week about what people might want, what's most important for them coming to Backdrop. I don't think I saw anything in there that related to current core issues, but that's also something that we can kind of keep an eye on, collect that information, create core issues out of things if there aren't ones already, and flag them with milestone candidate to review, a release from now, 3 months from now, or whatever. We could also kick this decision to the project management committee since they're supposedly in charge of the direction of the project. One thing I would like to note, though, is that getting consensus from the project management committee or even a vote can be a sort of a slow process. So I think it would be better if we could have a proposal for them to review rather than saying, please make a decision on something without a proposal by the proposed list. So I don't know if you guys have had a chance to review this list since last week and have thoughts about what we should put back on it. I personally really like the idea of having releases that are thematic, like, oh, this one's on user experience, this one's on security improvements, and this one's on API compatibility or whatever it is. But it seems to be that we adjust organically based on the issues that are getting the most attention. And it could be that halfway through a cycle, all of the issues that we've decided a priority have been completely ignored, but there's a whole bunch of new stuff that's come up that's getting a lot of attention that we're like, oh yeah, that's really good too. And so we end up switching something that had previously been a priority for something that's now a priority. And so I would like to kind of maintain our fluidity and our ability to kind of feel the pulse of the community and what people are currently fighting with or working on and getting those in. So I have like conflicting feelings about it, obviously. But yeah, I don't know. I think that now that we have this label, we have a better idea to take a better way to take a pulse of what the community is wanting, which is good. But now we have to figure out like, how do we use this label to make our priority list for the next release? So yeah, I don't know.
So you're just looking for feedback on how to make that decision?
Yeah, like where do we start? Who makes the call? How do we get it even like from our list of 100 issues that are tagged with this label down to 10 to submit to the PMC, right?
Sure. I just a couple of quick thoughts. I mean, one of which is I think that both you and Nate have already made clear, which is kind of obvious, that in a volunteer community, that whatever decision is made is only so binding, right? It's to some extent people are going to put their energy where they put it. But I think that there is some some value in occasionally people come and they just, how can I be helpful, right? And if we've defined priorities, that's great for them. So I think that's the goal. And with that in mind, like I would question, is a PMC decision like that much more valuable or needed than, just if we actually did go to the work to come up with a proposal that then went to the PMC, is there added value there? I don't know. Maybe it doesn't matter. But ultimately, really, all it is a sort of a list of, hey, these are things we think are important. We hope people will work on. So I don't know. You can decide how official you think you need to make that. But I think you're right that at the very minimum, we would need to provide the PMC with some suggestions, right? They don't have the time to like do the work. So I am inclined, truthfully, I mean, I have advocated in the past for making space for people to bring up new things, but that's very different than like making decisions. So I'd like, my ideas have been more around how do we surface items which we might not have been thinking about, and I'm less sure about how to like focus on them. I know that when I look at the list, as I scan through that list, it's like really hard for me to evaluate. It's like I go to the ones that are most important to me, not necessarily what I think are most important to the community. And I'm curious if people have ideas about how do we decide, like, I may not be the best bellwether, right? What are the improvements that are going to make Backrap best for the largest number of people?
Yeah, I struggle with that too. I mean, I feel like you are a member of the Backdrop community, so that something that's important to you is valid in the same way that I'm a member and something important to me is valid. But I don't know if, your perspective is more valid than mine or vice versa, right? Like that's really hard to gauge. And without having like 100 voices to all like back behind you or me or whatever, that's hard to count. Which I think that's where we want the PMC to come in. Where we're like, we have all these good ideas, how do we prioritize them? But yeah, I mean, even just for us to come up with that list is really tough. I don't know. I don't have a good answer. We also previously had talked about scheduling things for more than one release in the future too. Which we sort of vaguely done that, but not specifically. But I think now that we have this milestone candidate label, that might be something where it would be easier for us to do that, right? Where we could be like, okay, well, this release is going to be security focused and next release is going to be editorial focused. Then as things come up, we could be like, okay, well, that one goes into that release. And then as we start to see like another, huge surge of backwards compatibility needs or whatever it is, we feel like those all go into the release after that. I think we get a little more foresight. So, and another thing too is that we all have priorities, but the great thing about Backdrop is that things happen really soon. Like 3-4 months away doesn't seem very long, which I think is much easier for people to handle. It's like, okay, your priorities are going to come next release, but maybe someone else's are going to come this release. Yeah, I don't know. In general, I feel like the things that Backdrop needs right now are the things that bring it closest to Drupal, because we have a deadline of Drupal 7's end of life. And ideally, when Drupal 7 becomes end of life, we'll get a whole bunch of people who will push the button to see what it'll look like when their site runs on Backdrop. And the better and easier we can make that, I think the better for the Backdrop community as a whole, because it will start growing with more people contributing, and then it'll be much easier for us to figure out what our priorities are if you have more voices in the conversation. To a point. But yeah, so I think my priority right now would be focused on feature parity with either Drupal 7 contrib modules that we want in core, things like reference and fieldable files, over things that I think will be really great to have, like, I don't know, like ban module or something. But I also don't know, like, because we've had these issues like fieldable files and referencing core and layout relationships, if that's a feature parity with Drupal 7 panels. We've had those issues on the list before, and they've never gone in. Like, that's not really a priority to anyone who's on Backdrop right now. It's only a priority for people who aren't part of our community. So that also makes it really hard to weigh, like, what if those people never come to Backdrop and now we're like not serving our own community because we're serving our potential community? I don't know.
Right.
Well, in all fairness, all three of those issues, relationships, fieldable files, and references, all had actually a lot of activity and a lot of contributions to them, but they got held up on just like the complexity of the problem space. And it was just like, it's easier just to leave it in contrib or something like that. Like that seemed to be more what's happened. It hasn't been a lack of code or backing. It's just been like we hit a snag that was difficult to solve, and then we kind of spun our wheels for a little while and then kind of gave up on it.
I mean, that I think is the issue, is the giving up, right? Like, there was never a decision that's like, oh, fieldable files is better in contrib. We don't have fieldable files in contrib for Backdrop. That was just like one person really put in a lot of effort, and then it missed the milestone, and then no one ever worked on it again since. Right. So I think it's like we need to figure out, like, if this is really important, let's assign some responsibility. Be like, Jen, you have to test this right now. And then, well, I think that would help too.
Yeah, I think like addressing that question of how to unstick issues that there was momentum behind and got stuck is important, and also ties into the like setting priorities. Like, what does it mean to set a priority? And I'm thinking an example is we had a successful sprint day recently, right? And that seemed like something worth repeating. And so maybe one way we help unstick issues and or reinforce these priorities is by scheduling some sprint days that are devoted to like the hard issues, right? Because maybe that's why they get stuck, is there isn't an opportunity I think we try to do it in these weekly meetings, but maybe that's just
I'm not sure sprint is the right place for a hard problem. I feel like a sprint is a great place to get a whole bunch of little things done, but for the kind of focus that you need to work on a big hard problem like that, you need to be uninterrupted, and a sprint is the kind of place where you're going to be interrupted. So, I mean, I don't know if we can dedicate and be like, hey, everybody's going to be working on Backdrop this day. Maybe let's not interact with each other, right? So the one person who's working on the hard problem can, or we could have, some kind of focus that's like that. That's like, okay, like we're all here to help, help Doug Wilmot with whatever it is that he's working on, but we're not going to like ask anything. And, we're here to test stuff. If you have a pull request you want tested, we're here to do it. But, the rest of the people busy themselves with other stuff. right? So that it will be like committed to supporting the person who's doing the hard problem, but not bothering them. That would also be really good too. So I don't know where the balance is there. We just got to try it, I guess.
That all makes sense. I mean, and so if a sprint isn't the right way, right? So what is? And I think you just made a suggestion. Another, I hesitate to go this route, but is another way that we need to figure out some way to raise some money that on the really hard problems we can offer a bounty or hire somebody, right? And say, here's a really difficult problem, and maybe the solution to these really hard problems is a fundraising campaign or a Kickstarter or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just brainstorming, right? And
Yeah.
I know these discussions have been batted around for years, right? In the Drupal community, it's not new. So I haven't been maybe a part of them as often as you guys have. So
yeah, I'm not sure money is the answer. I feel like
right.
The problem with throwing money into the problem is that you you decrease everybody else's desire to contribute if they're not getting paid, if one person is or a small group of people are. But yeah, trying to find some way to support those people and that are willing to do the hard work, I think is important. I don't know what that is.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that we should try a sprint day where we have one person committed to working on like one really hard issue and everybody else working on, low-hanging fruit or whatever they're most passionate about, usability issues or bug fixes or whatever's coming up in the next release. And also be like, we're all here to support the one person on the hard issue. And I think if we can do that, we're not here to bother you, but if you have anything you need tested or anything you want to bounce ideas off of, we could do that. I think that's worth trying and seeing if we can make that work, especially in a remote situation. The person, if they don't want to be bothered, they can like disappear from Gitter for a while, right? And then they can come back when they're ready to have something, as long as they know there's people there that are going to help. I think that might be good.
Right. Maybe just I often think that just having somebody hold me accountable, right? Like sometimes I might say, I'm going to sprint this Saturday. Does anyone want to sprint with me? And part of my goal is just to get somebody to make me show up, right? It's like, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that something that comes to mind with that is like John Franklin's work on package signing. Like he's getting stuck a lot of times where he's written a lot of code, but there hasn't been there's so many moving pieces with project module and backdropcms.org and then Backdrop itself getting everything all together. Like he's really hung up on reviewing the code and then somebody having access to all of the servers to like make things actually happen. Like, because in most cases that's unfortunately me, because I'm currently the maintainer of project module. Maybe there could be another maintainer that would get added to make a project release and then to deploy the new version of project module on backdropcms.org. And then anyway, having all the support people necessary to facilitate that person would help a lot.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
There's probably lots of situations that are similar to that.
Yeah. Like the MailChimp sign up checkbox that took 4 of us something this week.
Right. Yeah, that actually happened though, which was impressive.
Well, almost.
Almost.
So the other thing I just want to say, like you talk about the security release, and to me, like that might be fundamentally a really important thing. There might be huge gaps, maybe, but personally, like it sounds really unexciting to me because I'm not perceiving security to be a big problem right now. It's like
You're not getting a ton of spam and like
it defines security that way. Like I did the SMTP module, right? I like that you had that in there.
Right, honeypot.
Sure.
Like auto ban, like. So these are problems I'm facing right now on all of my sites. Like we got spear phished from one of my sites recently, and I'm like, man, if I had an email obfuscator, that might not have happened. So I'm trying to look for things that are like relate to the real world I'm living in, where it's like I'm getting a lot of fake user accounts, I'm getting a lot of spear phishing, and some people are getting targeted attacks where they want to block individual IP addresses or ranges or whatever. And so I'm trying to say like these are like pain points we can solve if we did a security focused release. There are definitely some things in there that it's like not very exciting, but I think there's also like, I agree with you that we should not do a release that does not have any exciting features in it for everyone. But that doesn't mean we can't do like a security release where like 2 things you'll benefit from and 3 things you don't really understand. That might still be a good enough incentive for you to update.
Okay. Anybody else? Olaf, what do you think?
Yeah, sorry, I'm working
Okay.
here. So, yeah, it's hard to say. So there are so many fields, and in every field we could, yeah, make something, need something. And, yeah, I sometimes think it would be good to, yeah, get new people, however. And it don't have to be so many people, I think, because my impression is that developing Backdrop is much easier than developing Drupal 8, where the last features, for example, for Drupal 8.7, I don't know if you read the blog post, so they wrote for this feature, which now got stable into core, they worked 128 people for a long time. And I think if we had 5 people more, we could do a lot of things. We don't need 100 people. It would be nice, but I think developing for Backdrop, yeah, is quite easy in comparison. And yeah, so maybe it would also be an idea to to talk with people and ask them if they want to do something. So talk with individual persons whom we know. Not only via Twitter, but on work or something like that. So that was a quite spontaneous statement.
Well, I think to tie that to having set priorities, right, is that there are people, I think there's a lot of people who will help if you just ask them, right? And if we've defined a priority and we know, oh, this person is good at that, they can help us with that, then we have a specific request to say, hey, can you help us with that? And that's harder to do when you don't have priorities, right?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
if we say that like security is our priority and we identify a few different things, we can sit down and think, well, who do we know that might be willing to help us? They're just waiting for an invitation or they're waiting for that right opportunity. And that's where having that focus is helpful.
Yeah.
But we have to do it, right? We have to make the effort to reach out. So.
Yeah. I wonder if we can go through this list of things that we have in the agenda, as well as the milestone candidate issues. Determine which one of those have that, enthusiasm. I keep using is the word. Somebody that's championed it in the past that basically just, got stuck on something. Basically, like the will to review or community buy-in or whatever it was. Find the ones that have a high likelihood of, getting contributors working on those things, and then saying, this is a combination of we have the will, it's there, plus we think that it's also valuable, and then make the list that way.
Yeah, and maybe for everything on the list, we should look for one responsible person who's already there, who knows the topic, which things have been done or already discussed, and so on.
Yeah.
For example, this could be me for translation, or Jen, or maybe Mike for reference, and so on.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. And like John for package signing.
Doc Wilmot for layout relationships.
Viewable files, I don't know with who, because
Doc Wilmot had been pushing that one.
Yeah, okay.
He's actually been the driving source behind a lot of these issues that
I think
kind of pulled out.
Jonathan Daggerhart also did a bunch of work on fieldable files, and he's been
Mhm.
looking for ways to contribute to Backdrop lately. That might be good to get him back in on that one too, if we have too many things assigned to Duckloma. But yeah, let's do that. Let's run through this list. I like this idea. And I also like this idea going forward where we could be like, these are the things that we have people that are passionate about who are going to work on them. These are the people. So we have a pairing of those and we put that on the agenda for the next release. So then it's the PMC, they'll say, yeah, that sounds great, or no, it doesn't. And then if that person doesn't have time that release, we can bump it to the next one. So we're not like, Jen, you have to do this by whatever date, or like talk moment, whatever it is. Make it be like, you're responsible for this issue, but you're not obligated to it. But then that way, I think they'll feel good about the responsibility, but hopefully they won't feel too much pressure from the obligation. And if they can say, I definitely am not going to have time in the next 4 months, we can schedule it, then release after, and see if there's a way to make that work. So I love this idea, Nate and Tim, for recommending this time. So Nate, do you want to go through the list? I put them in order. I'm going to try and get the bottom of the list updated when you go through the top.
Oh, I see. You made links to all of them. Nice.
Well,
Or some of them. Okay, sure. Let's go ahead and get started. This could take a while.
well, we don't have to just like describe them all because I know we don't have very much time. But if you could just be like, package signing has been owned by John. Just the most pattern has been owned by Gregory. Like something just to see if we have someone who's passionate about making it happen.
Okay, let's see. What should we call this person? Do we really want to like go so far as to like call them a lead on this or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking, or an advocate or something, like to assign, if we had the 5 most important issues and we had one person assigned to each one, and they may not be the person that has to solve the problem, but they're the one that's going to help unblock it, right?
I like advocate. Yeah, I like that. Just open is Gregory. Okay, so let's start. So up at the top of the list, based on the way this has been organized, which is somewhat haphazard, but we've got the list of security items here first. The top one we have is package signing issue 1992, in which this was something that we actually had a chance of making in 113. It's been bumped. Our advocate is John Franklin. It seems like we've got the resources and the will necessary to make this one happen in the near future. So that's a good candidate. Do we want to go any further than that? I think that's enough information.
That's fine.
Okay. Trusted host patterns, issue 2568. Gregory Klonos is our advocate for this one. Again, like something that could have actually been put into 113, but got bumped. So another good possibility there, although trusted host patterns is hardly going to be a banner feature for any version. Just whenever it gets added, it's like a nice to have, not really a killer feature. Honeypot and Core, issue 1169. I've looked at this one. Sudibun originally opened the issue. We haven't heard from him in quite some time.
So can I suggest something here quickly, which an advocate, like I could be an advocate for one of these issues, but if I were, that doesn't mean I'm going to solve it.
Yeah.
But it might mean that I'm going to adopt it and I'm going to promote it and, try and help recruit somebody. And if I can't, then, say that like, hey, I've tried, I made an effort. We don't have anybody right now. So just throwing that out there, there might be, I don't know John Franklin well, right? But maybe he is the technical person to get something done, but he needs an advocate to work with him, right? To sort of like push the issue. So I'm just trying to distinguish between the person who's maybe going to do the hard work, that they may not actually be the advocate for the issue, right? Maybe the advocate is Gregory or I, who are just sort of helping them out and removing roadblocks or representing that issue at meetings.
Yeah, facilitating. Yeah. Even just the person that this isn't the friendliest word, but it's very effective. The nagger, the person that's just like nagging, like, hey, is there anything yet? Is there anything yet? Is really effective, actually.
Sure. If I'm the technical person that's stuck, I might actually appreciate somebody just coming back and asking me how it's going, right? What can we do to help you? So part of what I'm trying to do is like say I might be an advocate for one of these that interests me, like Honeypot, I think Backup and Migrate, or SMTP. But if I took that on, it would be like, okay, I will try to work with somebody else who can do the hard work, because I'm not the one who's going to do it.
Load public forms through Ajax. Interesting.
Yeah, I kind of have a similar thing to that, where it's like for me and my dad, like neither of us is really a good themer, so I keep doing all these color module issues because it's like a way I can reuse a theme rather than building a new theme from scratch. But it's like it's more like the things I contribute to are based on annoyance rather than enthusiasm. So it's like, this thing is annoying me today, so I'm going to do an issue. Or like, I did one for multiple default values that's been sitting in the issue queue for a while, but it was like, I wanted to do it, and it was really hard. And so I was just like, I'm going to make an issue for this. So, I don't know. It's hard to stay motivated on things that are annoying.
Yeah. Well, let's keep rolling through the list here. Otherwise, this is going to take forever. So Honeypot in core 1169. Jen possibly saying maybe something in here, but there's no obvious candidate looking through the issue there of somebody that's like pushing hard on it to the point that they've actually written some code or followed up for months or anything like that.
Like I say, I would take one of these and then like be an advocate for trying to find somebody, like use Twitter and other things and say, hey, I'm really trying to get this into core. Can you help me? But I don't know if Honeypot is the one I should take. It seems like it might be a good one because it seems like an easy compared to some of the others.
Yeah, I wonder, like, I don't know, for something like this where we don't have somebody obvious already, like maybe we need to evaluate, like, even if we had an advocate, would this be one that we chose,
Sure.
So maybe we shouldn't be chasing down advocates for issues that we might not think are higher priorities anyway. I'm a little bit waffly on Honeypot myself.
That's our biggest problem on all of Backdrop sites. All of the Backdrop CMS.org sites. That's the other biggest problem.
But Honeypot didn't solve the problem on our sites.
It was a combination of Honeypot,
Akismet, I think it actually turned out to be effective.
Something else. Yeah, but I still think that we need to solve that problem.
Right.
For all Backdrop sites. It might not be that module.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's one that's a little bit questionable to me because I sometimes something like spam prevention, it's mercurial, it needs to change rapidly in order to continue being effective. And so that makes me just a little bit nervous because I think that maintaining something that would be effective would be difficult, and then ending up just with cruft that did nothing would end up being really easy.
That's valid.
That was my first reaction to that one too.
Will you guys, or Tim, maybe if Nate's will you add that comment onto the issue so that we don't forget? Okay. All right.
So yeah, let's keep moving on these anyway. Ban IP addresses issue 1878. We removed ban capabilities in a very early version of Backdrop. Actually, Backdrop's focus has changed a lot since then, actually. Like when we were first doing that, we were just like stripping out everything from Drupal 7 that nobody used or that was less commonly used.
Less than 80% used.
Yeah, it had a performance impact too. It was like the very first query that Drupal did before it did anything was checking the band table. So anyway, 1878, again, like possibly spam like prevention. It looks like actually enthusiasm for ban itself is, there's some there, but people are more interested in having something that automatically bans, something that was a little bit more proactive and maintenance free. I saw Jason post a comment recently that they actually have a client's auto ban module developed by Hook 42 that could potentially be ported for kind of achieving that purpose. I imagine like most custom things, though, it's probably very targeted. Like, if you hit like certain URLs, like a really good one is like WP admin, like on a site that's clearly not WordPress, if that happens 5 times, then ban the address or something like that. So you'd probably end up with like the implementation from that would be like a really fixed list of potential bad paths that would cause auto banning. But I'm not sure. Like if in core, if we could maintain an effective list there, maybe we could. I'm not sure. So we don't have any clear takers on that, although the discussion there is active and engaging. So there is the potential for enthusiasm there. It's also like the actual problem space of banning, especially with the flat IP address list, is not challenging, and it's easy to create a module that achieves that basic purpose. Do you have any other thoughts on that, Jen? Okay. Email obfuscator in core issue 3270. Let's see. So nothing was happening for quite a while until Jen 12 days ago hopped in saying, maybe we could make this a possibility on the email field display settings. This is
also a feature parity with WordPress issue too, where they have just a handy function you can throw in anywhere and it'll do that.
It's not automatic though. It's not like every email address. It's like there's just a function that lets you obfuscate it if you want.
They don't have the same kind of structure that we do. Like we could do that where we could like automatically add it on an email field. We could automatically add it in like our text filtering system. They don't have those kind of things in WordPress.
Well, they do have text filtering. They don't have an individual field, but I'm curious if that happens automatically when you type, just an email address into a WordPress body field. This is in the same category of like, I'm not sure how effective this is these days.
I have sort of mixed feelings about it too, because I've run into situations where I want my email address to be visible on a site and the site keeps trying to block it. And it's like, no, I'm doing this on purpose. So is there a solution that accommodates both? And
yeah, I think there would be a checkbox on like the email field, right? It would be like obfuscate or not, right. Or something in your, filter settings. It would be like when you convert emails, do you obfuscate or not?
Yeah, I feel like for something like this, or really pretty much any feature, like we should really only be adding it to core if we think that it should be turned on by default.
Yeah.
And because if it's something you turn on manually later, well, we're not helping people in the out-of-box experience.
Right.
And it would be just as well that it was a contrib module in that case.
I think we need to have more discussion around it. I was just thinking if we can protect people out of the box, that would be better. And then Tim, if you have a use case where you don't want it, as long as you have a way to turn it off, I think that would be fine. But if we don't think the majority of people would feel like they were being protected, if we think they would feel like we were interfering with what they were trying to do, then that wouldn't belong in core. But it was only tagged recently, so I think it needs more discussion.
Well, a good solution is to provide a good alternative to putting your email in the body field, right? So, for example, multiple contact forms. Like if you have one of the places that emails show up a lot is there's 5 staff people at a site, and they want the user to be able to contact any of the 5, so they put all 5 of their email addresses there. If you have a contact form where you're allowed, and I forget if the Backdrop contact form does this, but if the contact form allows you to have 5 different recipients.
I mean, I think
just pick which one you want to use.
5 email addresses in the body field, as long as bots can't read them and humans can at the end of the day.
Okay.
Right. But I think there's a use case for both, where like maybe you have a comment form or something, and you a web form or something, and you want that protection there. That's totally fine. Contact forms are sometimes problematic, like from a user experience standpoint, where it's like, okay, like, yes, it's better to have people fill out the form, but sometimes you just want to click a link and like type an email. So I think both are valid. I think it's just what we don't want to have is like put in something that's going to hurt people, right? Like we can't make the email address hidden until you like click on it or something. It just needs to look like it always looks, but then like bots can't find it, or only really smart bots can find it, stuff like that.
Okay.
But yeah, anyway, let's talk about it in the issue, because I think we do need to evaluate more use cases.
Yep.
Okay, so the next one up is facilitate 2-factor authentication. I think, Jen, you may have pulled this in as just a general security issue, like as a possible thing for a security-focused release.
Yeah, there was a bunch of activity on that issue, and so I was like, oh, I hadn't even considered it, but it does seem like if we're talking about security, like having 2-factor on your website makes sense.
Yeah, it's been over a year though since there's been that activity. I agree though, like even like this isn't even saying add 2-factor authentication, it's facilitate it, you know, make it easier to have more complex login mechanisms.
Yeah.
Which would be great. More of like a API initiative actually here, making it so that the login system is more flexible. I'm just gonna move on from this one though, because there's no like recent updates are few.
Yeah.
But it is a good idea. Yeah, so definitely, and this is definitely something that Core itself has to provide, rather than like the only way you can do this in Contrib now is basically kind of like form alter the hell out of the user login form, or like just like rip out the thing entirely and use something completely different, because it's just like what Core provides right now is just so focused on the normal user name password combination that it's difficult to hook into in any way. SMTP module in Core issue 3199.
This is also a little tricky because in order to use it, you have to use an external service. So it would basically be like putting like a thing in that's unusable on its own. But because it's so common that people have their websites on a different machine than their email these days, like if they have like Google managing their mail or whatever, it's pretty common that your Backdrop site can't deliver mail without it. So it's definitely like, I feel very conflicted about that one too.
Yeah, and this has been covered in that issue. There's been some discussion about like getting different email concepts all mixed together, about like my mail, HTML mail, and SMTP. And I think it's been covered in the issue we're definitely just talking about the problem of delivery. That is the issue that we're facing, that any email server or any web server today, basically it's impossible to get it into people's inboxes without using a service. I know I've tried really, really hard to set up a web server that had like absolutely everything, DKIM keys, reverse DNS, what are the other things? SPF records, like all of it combined. You can follow everything in the whole handbook and it still doesn't matter, because email providers these days, basically it's like an insider's club, where it's like either you're allowed to send email or you're not. And like Google maintains its own list of like, we trust these IPs only and nobody else. So anyway, so that makes it so that SMTP using a service is nearly a requirement these days to get any email working. If email working out of Backdrop is a thing that we should be focused on, or that we want to have focus on, then this is almost a requirement. But yeah, we wouldn't. I don't think we would cater towards any one provider or another. It would just be like, configure your email server. The extent of what I'm imagining is basically like, check boxes, use built-in email server, use SMTP server. Like, what's your server username and password? Like, right. And that's kind of it. Let's see. Herb Duels, he actually split off his proposal into taking the mail system module and just putting the mail system module class in core. I'm not sure about that, but anyway, so let's see. Did HerbDuel originally file this? No, OP originally filed this. HerbDuel seems like he might be interested in putting some muscle behind it. Although on the other hand, like I also kind of feel like this, it stands alone so well. Like we could solicit, any like moderate skill level volunteer, and they could probably make something like this happen.
This is an example where I think I could recruit somebody, a colleague or somebody, to help me work on this. I wouldn't do it myself, but I think you're right. It's pretty simple.
Mm-hmm. Or it could be simple. It could also not be simple.
Which one?
Everything.
SMTP or
module.
So the problem is that Backdrop Core doesn't handle more than one mail handler at a time.
Right.
So I think we need to solve that problem too. So it can get a little messy. You're not like, so the way SMTP works is just like throw out course, use mine. But there's a bunch of other stuff like HTML mail that's like throw out whatever's currently used, use mine. And if you try and use these two things together, like I want to send HTML email securely, you have to use this like mail system API module that like merges them all together, and it's kind of a mess. And I think that issue might also need to be solved when we put this in. So
yeah, DMARC. Jason is commenting in the chat a couple of minutes ago. DMARC is another system you have to set up. I set up DMARC as well. Yeah, it still doesn't send email. We can decide on it, but
we'll probably would be good to look at it first and see how messy the rabbit hole gets.
Right.
Because it could just be that we like update our core mail handler, the only one that is supported to do SMTP, and then we wouldn't need to swap out core with another one, and that would probably be the easiest way to get it in.
Yeah, exactly. So if you needed the complex situation of multiple systems all tying together, then Contrib could basically continue doing what it's doing right now, but out of the box, we would provide an SMTP handler, and then provide an option in the UI for actually turning it on.
Yeah.
The mail system right now, one of the most unfortunate things is its user interface is just like, it's so confusing. if we could get
Contrib module.
The Contrib module. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
you like select a class from that drop down select list to say like which
class do you want to use?
Yeah, which class do you want to use?
From?
Yeah, and it doesn't even have it doesn't even have like a human readable label on it or a description of what it does or anything. It's literally selecting a class name from a drop down select list. Okay, sorry. Let's get too tied up in that. My bad. Backup and migrate into core, issue 2409. I haven't looked at this in a long time. I'd be concerned about this. Backup and migrate is its library that it uses, as far as I know, is kind of huge because it doesn't use like MySQL dump. It like manually runs everything through PHP, like selecting stuff out of the table and then writing it into a dump file. Because I think that at the time it was written, and probably still is the case today, you couldn't assume that MySQL dump was accessible on the server or that the database system even was MySQL. We're in a slightly better situation that core only supports MySQL these days. So potentially we could end up with something a little bit more opinionated than what backup and migrate does. On the other hand, backup and migrate works, but it is a lot of functionality.
I think we could also try and figure out like what is the 80% need and only take that part of backup and migrate. And then we could do like a really clean integration with like the installer or updater or whatever, and leave the rest of backup and migrate in contrib.
Let's see, do we have an advocate for this one that is apparent?
I think I'm the one that tagged it because it was the most popular contrib module. My name isn't on any of these things yet because of Honeypot not being. So, you want to assign it to me? I'm happy to remove the squirrel.
Let's see, there's some contention about whether or not this is appropriate for core. Jeff is kind of naysaying it, Jeff Serendipity.
What?
John Franklin has concerns about just it working effectively.
Effectively or like securely?
Effectively.
I'll have
He
to
says
remove
it has
it.
some scaling problems.
Oh, like if your database backup is too big or something?
Yeah. Herbduel entertaining the idea, not really coming down in either direction. Oh, actually, Herbduel says not sure he's a good candidate either.
It's our number one contrib module.
Yeah. I don't know. This one, I don't know. The enthusiasm for it is like a little bit mixed. Like there actually could be like straight up opposition to this.
Some of the opposition is to node scroll part of it, which I think
Yeah, that's not going to go in.
that's not a problem, right? We get rid of that.
Yeah, that's obvious. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I keep using champion instead of advocate. Which
You're like champion.
Good champion.
I hear
Yep.
these not playing.
Okay. Let's see.
I think
Go ahead.
I think something like backup and migrate is interesting because of the automatic updates.
Yeah.
So midterm, I think we need something like that. On the other hand, now it's maintained by someone and it works very well. So it would be more work for us to maintain it. So I'm not sure. Maybe a really basic thing for core, like backup the database and the config files during a core update.
Yeah. I think though that it's really important that we get some kind of backup done before we like turn on automatic updating by itself, by default. But I think that backup and migrate also provides a very different tool to our users where it's like, hey, do you want a copy of your database? Push this button. And I think that if we have something in core that handles the backup anyway, it would probably be pretty easy to provide a user interface that has that button on it. And I think that whether it's database and config or just database or database files config, whatever, that functionality I think would cover the 80% of what the contrib module people want. And we could stop there in terms of backup and migrate. Like it doesn't have to be backup and migrate module in core. It can just be like, what is this one feature that everybody needs that they're installing this module for? And then that can grow too. Like once we get that and then we realize that backup and migrate is still our number one module, we're like, well, what else do they need? It doesn't have to all go in at once. So we could start with like, first make a backup before you do an automatic update. And then we could be like, now provide a button. We'd be like, okay, what else? And just watch that. But also we don't have to do this for 1.4, right? Like we could put this on the list for 1.5 and reevaluate after 1.4 comes up.
Yeah, interesting. I'm brain is churning about simplifications there. I mean, because it could make it work for some situations, but making it work for all is difficult, and maybe that's fine. You know, maybe just having it work for most situations is going to be better than not having something. Okay, let's keep going. Layout relationships, issue 2134. Currently has a pull request, needs some work. Al Rozekov had done some work recently. Doc Wilmot made the initial pull request. I'm not quite sure what its status is. This is interesting because the concept is difficult, like the understanding of how it should be implemented, but actually the amount of code it adds is not a lot. You know, it's like a small segment of really complex code. So something that could be manageable, I think. Huh. Very interesting. Anyway, this one, Doc Wilmot or myself actually. It is fun. It seems like we're about the only and Al Roscoff who did some QA testing, but I don't think that he necessarily could take on the implementation. Let's see. Anything else on layout relationships? It's a good candidate. Opinion.
I would like to back that because I have a ton of sites that use panels in 777, and moving them to backdrop is going to be hard without this feature. I think that like there's workarounds you can do by using like contextual filters and like creating blocks that hard code a relationship, and then placing like doing like a views get view in the code of a block, but it's not ideal. And I think if we had this, even if the UI is tricky,
as it is right now is actually, it doesn't even do the user interface. And I think that might be,
by design.
yeah, by design, and also where this issue got potentially tied up is I posted some screenshots. I was like, here's some ways that we could make this happen. Like that would be super awesome and hard. Like the idea of dynamically adding relationships rather than adding them up front, which would be very cool. Like if you could just add them on the fly. I don't know. Well, maybe we should see which way is more manageable and then start there.
I'm out of time. I need to leave.
Okay. I kind of think maybe that we should put a pin in this and come back to it next week.
Right.
We still have, the next week will be focused on 113 anyway. The next meeting will actually be the day after 113 is released. So we can, pop the champagne and celebrate our accomplishments and then stress out about what we're going to do next.
I would like to open a PMC issue with at least maybe like a TBD on which issues it's going to be, but just so that people know that there's going to be something they'll have to yay and nay on next week.
Okay. That sounds good. And we'll see. Like the discussion out of the PMC could be interesting because they might have the same kind of thoughts of like, should we even be voting on this? Like.
Well, if we generate a list and give it to them, and they don't feel like they need to vote on it, then they would just say, "Do whatever you want." Yes. So.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and that might be the result there. Okay. All right. Well, let's stop for now. I know it's a little inconclusive, but yeah, we still made some good progress going through some conceptual candidates for 114. Let's keep cracking on the bug fixes for 112.7 and those last couple of items for 113, and we'll do what we can in the next week. And so I will be doing the release on Wednesday. I think because of some scheduling, it'll end up coming later in the day. But yeah, we'll coordinate that via Gitter and make an issue on GitHub and start scheduling it and do all of that jazz. So, all right, that's it. So thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it, as always. See you guys on the line.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.